Two down, one to go. The international break is over, people, and we are ready to look back at all of the action involving the mighty Azzurri. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend Adam. Adam, how we doing, man?
Doing very well, thank you, Rory. I did consider, a bit like Mbappe, whether I should just be rolling out for the key podcast. But unlike Mbappe, I think there were some decent topics. So I'm here, I'm ready to go again. And yeah, incredible weekend of football and week, it's fair to say, Rory. I'm sure there's going to be a lot kind of reminisced in the English edition, the Premier League edition, more importantly. However, good talking points from an Italy point of view as well, right, Rory?
Yeah, there was lots that happened. There was lots that happened. I have to say, thank you for joining me. So it's not just me talking to myself like the rest of my day is. But yeah, there's lots and lots to talk about. Obviously, there's one game we're going to kind of talk about the result, but not the actual game. And we'll be talking more generally about Italy and the marked improvement we have seen across this Spalletti reign and how excited maybe we can get about this Italy team. We'll be taking your questions because, yes, listeners, viewers, we will be asking more regularly for your questions, for your input. I think it's really valued. It's really useful. So we'll be answering some of your questions before we, of course, turn our focus back to domestic football as we start looking at the Scudetto race and what we could learn between now and the next final international break that everybody can't wait for. So, Adam, if there's anything, without further ado, should we take a quick break and go for the Azzurri? Bentornato, welcome back, and it is time to talk all things Italy. A decent draw against Belgium with a 2-2 result with 10 men after Pellegrini decided that he'd had enough and fancied a bath. And of course, a 4-1 win over the team that shouldn't be competing. We will be looking back at both of these games and giving our view on what happened. Adam, let's talk about Italy 2, Belgium 2. This, as a result, we have to say, is very impressive, right? I think going down to 10 men against the team, I know we always say that Belgium flatter to deceive and they're not as good as people think they are, but down to 10 men, Italy's still putting a very good performance here, right? And being 2-0 up after 24 minutes, that's impressive.
Yeah, it was a very impressive start. I think everyone was very excited by the kind of entering or the first 40 minutes of the game because you actually saw a free-flowing Italy side. Obviously, I'm going to call it out, but Di Marco on that left-hand side was absolutely incredible, showing why everyone has kind of expected this kind of hype to kind of come to fruition in terms of its display. But it was just fluid football, Rory. It seems like everyone kind of knew their roles, they knew what to do. I mean, traditionally, Italy don't start off games very well under Spalletti. It seems to be the case. However, they did take it to Belgium. Belgium, I think, were kind of almost starstruck by kind of the approach. I think maybe they anticipated it to be a slow start. And yeah, it wasn't for the lack of trying from a Belgian perspective, but I think they didn't really get to grips with this Italian squad. And, you know, I think even Cambiasso on the other side, coming into the inside of the pitch as well, caused a little bit of a threat for them. But yeah, inevitably, the stupidity, I would put it, as for Pellegrini to make that challenge when maybe, I mean, he didn't necessarily need to. I appreciate he kind of felt he needed to lunge in, but he cost Italy, I feel, the game. Because I think had that been 11 against 11, I think they see out the game. And that's potentially, or maybe even add more goals, Rory, potentially, because of the way that Italy had threatened in that first half. But yeah, I think that potentially causes a little bit of doubt over him that already was there, right, Rory? I think there's already some doubts about whether he should have even been in the squad in the first place. But yeah, how did you kind of see the game?
Yeah, I think, well, Pellegrini he's having a very difficult season, right?
Yeah.
Roma are having a difficult season. He has come to kind of signify the difficulty of that season. I think there's been quite a few like lightning rod moments for him this year where he's caught the attention in what's been a difficult time. So I think, yeah, it's another just bad moment for him when, when things aren't going your way, nothing goes your way, right? When it rains, it pours, more cliches, right? So I think that's just kind of an issue for him. But with Italy in general, I think when I was watching this, I thought I remember after the last round of kind of qualifiers or after the Euros, and we were kind of going like, wow, Spalletti might not have much time. The heat is getting turned up here. Like, is this something like, is he going to get the time to try and implement this thing? And I think what we've seen is I'm impressed by how quickly it's turned around. And not only the results, because obviously a 2-2 draw here, not a win, obviously famously not a win, but it's the performances that are so much better and the liquid football of like, I think there were so many attacks here and so many moves from Italy that were just like the 1-2 passes of triangles and like straight through the Belgium team from like defense to attack quickly. And it's like what we saw with the Napoli team. It's what we've seen with Spalletti teams fairly consistently. The best version of it was the Napoli team, right? And I think just how quickly he's managed to implement that whilst bringing in new players, right? So like, Richie is now starting in midfield more regularly. Calafiori is playing in the defence where maybe he wasn't playing so regularly before. Like, Cambiasso wasn't a player who was featured regularly for Italy until recently. So not only is he bringing in these kind of players that are newer, but they're also learning this style of football very quickly and they're implementing it very well. I think it kind of highlights how good a coach he is, really, and how he manages to maximise that time on the training ground. And I think it's really easy because international football, obviously, every result is either like a great festival or an absolute disaster, right? Like there's no middle ground with these things. So it's really easy to get carried away negatively and positively. But when you see performances like this, you do start to look forward to the World Cup and go, okay, which is a big if, but if this trajectory continues, what can this team do, right?
Yeah.
We know there's a lot of talent. They've got a great manager. Like, is this a team we should be keeping an eye out on? Like, I've been open about the fact that Retegui, I've never been massively convinced by, but this step up to Atalanta, he seems to have stepped up to the level himself, scored again against Belgium, and I think like within the first minute, right? And I think some of the players I maybe had doubts about are starting to progress as well. Maybe there is more quality there than I thought. I still think Italy lack depth in attack, right? If it's not Retegui, then all of a sudden you're kind of struggling a bit. When Scamacca comes back, there'll be more depth, etc.
Sure.
But I think this is a team and these performances I'm starting to look and go, okay, there's quite a lot of like this could be an exciting time. And handling a player like Barella not being there with a player like Richie coming in, I think they are very similar profile players. I think obviously Richie is a little bit younger, a bit less developed than Barella, obviously less experienced, but I think he's kind of a natural successor, not to push Barella out of the team already, but if I'm Inter's owner, if I'm Beppe Marotta, however, I am going, okay, sign him. Like, we need him, right? So I think it's, some exciting players in that team, and Spalletti's definitely getting the most out of it. Do you think this is a team we could be excited for going into the World Cup, even though it is miles away?
Yeah, I think this is the question I had was generally, are there positions that still need to be decided? And I think it's fair to say that maybe he's still trying to work out the personnel. I think almost defensively that they seem kind of in a place where they understand what the roles are going to be and who the personnel are going to be. So it looks inevitable that Di Lorenzo, for example, will be that right-sided centre back, for example, alongside Bastone and then Calafiori. But Buongiorno probably will also have a shout for being in that squad as well. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. But when you look beyond that, I think it's still up for grabs in terms of that balance of the squad because you've got so much options available to you in the respect of the wing back positions, for example, Adoji and DeMarco, for example, on one side. You could even put Cambiasso on that left hand side, but he was deployed against Belgium on that right hand side a bit more so. That offered a bit more dynamism, and I think something I would say is maybe a bit of trickery. Perhaps, and I think also with Villanova coming through, hopefully he'll have a good season at Atalanta going forward as well. I think that's going to be great for the Azzurri squad in general. And then I think that middle seems to be the question, doesn't it? I think it's who plays in those positions. Now, as you rightly allude to, I think Barella, on his day, he's an automatic pick. But with the performances that have been displayed by certain individuals already this season, it's going to be an interesting dilemma for Spalletti, isn't it? Certainly from a point of view of David Vertesi, maybe not consistent enough at Inter, but he seems to pull it on when he's in the Azzurri shirt, for example. Tonali's coming back into it, so definitely there's a shout for him. I think one of the questions we had from Andrea, who was going to join us this evening, but unfortunately had some other duties to attend to. His kind of thought is whether Tonali should be played in a position slightly higher up the pitch, so potentially the number 10 behind the main striker. I don't know. I personally still see him as more of a kind of central midfielder as opposed to an attacking midfielder. If everyone's available, personally, Rory, I'd have Chiesa behind the Retegui or a Lorenzo Luca, or whether it's even Scamacca. Can Scamacca get himself back into the squad? I don't know. But what I will say is I don't get the Pellegrini inclusion based on his form alone. And I think there's a lot of question marks around what Pellegrini actually adds to this squad. What was your impressions of Pellegrini in particular for this match? Obviously, he gets sent off. Do you think that harms his opportunities going forward?
I think his general club form harms his opportunities going forward. I think, being sent off, getting a red card happens. I don't think a manager has ever really, unless it's like a horrendous tackle where you try to end someone's career, I don't think a manager's ever going to be like, you got sent off in that game, you have no future for me as a player. I think his form is more alarming. And I think, I know that I am like Roma curious, right? They're a team that I really like. Yeah. And he's a player that I really like because when he plays well, I think he does that number 10 creative role so well. And he could become like a key creative linchpin of this team. We just need him to be in form. So I think the only thing that's stopping him from having a future in this team is his form. I think if he's on form, he's on that team sheet. Honestly, I think on his day, he's a fantastic player. I think Tonali, I prefer him kind of box to box a little bit deeper. I don't know if he's still able to get those runs forward, but I don't think he's as consistently creative as other players. I don't think he's as able to unpick a lock as consistently as other players. He's very good at keeping play moving. His passing range is fantastic. But I think sometimes you need someone who can beat a player who's got a bit of bit more variety to his game. Sure. And I think Tonali is very good at what he does, but I don't know if I want him as the key. When you've only got one attacker as well, I don't know if I want him as the other attacking threat. I would rather have Pellegrini or go to two up front. And maybe have a Scamacca if he's fit, or a Raspadori playing off Retegui behind him kind of thing. I think Raspadori's more my kind of option. I like two strikers. I think we're starting to see the resurgence of a strike partnerships. And I think maybe that could be something that you could look at as well. If you've got a player like Richie, maybe let's say Fratesi a little bit further forward because he's going to be that attacking midfielder. Maybe you can have those two strikers, but I think I prefer Tonali a bit deeper in midfield. I think that's where he plays his best football. But I think the wing backs is a really good point as well. I like Bellanova. I think just having him off the bench coming off is a really exciting option as well. Just that depth, that that the player coming off the bench isn't a drop in quality. And I think Buongiorno is unlucky to not be in that defence. I would expect if anyone's going to drop out, it's going to be Calafiori really for Buongiorno, I imagine. I think he's quite unlucky to not be in that starting 11. But very encouraging for Italy. And Spalletti. We do have to talk about Belgium very quickly. This wasn't a strong Belgium team. No. You're looking at the team sheet, you're like, okay, there's no Kevin De Bruyne, obviously. There's no Lukaku. There's Doku and Leandro Trossard, my guy, getting a goal and an assist. But what did you make of Belgium? I think obviously there's quite a few younger players coming through now. This is the start of a kind of new generation. What did you make of them?
I think you can see this is a transitional squad, right? I think although if you look at the grand scheme of it, a lot of those players are still in their kind of mid-20s, a lot of them. So the likes of Faze at the centre-back position and Stelz, who's the goalkeeper who plays for Nottingham Forest, or Castells even, sorry. But yeah, I think from a point of view, I wasn't as... impressed, shall we say, by the Belgians. I think they are considerably weaker. But I think this day was going to come, wasn't it? I think there was always going to be this kind of feeling that there's a generation of the Belgium side. I'm not going to refer to it as golden generation because I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think they progressed Belgium further than they have been in terms of their footballing standings anyway. For the last 20 years, I think I want to say, Rory, the last time I saw a decent Belgium squad was probably 94 World Cup. That's the only time I can remember them having a really good squad. I remember those days in the late 90s where they had the Impenza brothers, if you remember.
I do. Emil Impenza was great
yeah.
on one of the championship managers. I can't remember which one, but he was very good on one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And there was always a lot of hype about their generation, but it never kind of flourished, did it? And I feel like, obviously Tedesco hasn't been everyone's cup of tea, it's fair to say. He's pissed off the likes of Courtois, and that's why he's not being picked at the moment. Kevin De Bruyne, I mean, I don't know if you remember, Roy, but in the last round of games, he basically said, and it was kind of seen as lip reading, but at the time it was like, this squad is shit. This squad is shit, basically. So he clearly just doesn't have a love for the Belgium national squad now either, which kind of means, I suppose, you're relying on the likes of Christian Benteke up front, perhaps, because he's at DC United these days. Well, I want to say it's DC United. I might be
2012
wrong there,
again. I'm feeling nostalgic. There's a Barclaysman for you. Christian Benteke.
That's why he's doing it for Galatasaray these days, isn't he? And then obviously Lukaku, who's the main threat for them. Openda, I think, struggled against Italy, and this even when they were down to Italy down to 10 men in that respect. I don't think he necessarily really pushed the defenders much. I think there was one incident where Bastoni gets a bit caught in the middle of the pitch, and maybe debatably Belgium could have maybe been given a penalty on that occasion. But yeah, had it not been for Trossard, I'm not necessarily looking at this Belgium squad and thinking they're a threat. I know they've got Jeremy Doku on the other side who can be a threat. Maybe it's also the fact that they don't have a little bit as much fight in the middle of the park. I don't know what your thoughts are, but Onana was kind of seen as this potential player. Obviously, Tielemans has definitely upped his game this season since his resurgence with Villa. But I don't know. Maybe it's just a balance in this team that I feel is letting them down. Do you feel like Tedesco's getting the balance right?
Well, I think Tedesco isn't long for the job, and if it wasn't for those two goals, it looked like he was going to go, right. I think
exactly.
the Belgian FA need to find out how to pick managers, because their run of managers has been horrendous. Like was it Wilmots was the manager, wasn't it? Wilmots. The Guillemots is the indie band from the early 2000s. The Wilmots was in charge, and it was Martinez, right? Yeah. And then now Tedesco. It doesn't feel like a great run of coaches, of managers that are really going to push on. So I think, look, that's kind of the main issue, I would say. But I think, that midfield, I like Onana. The question with him is always consistency. Is he going to be more consistent now he's at Aston Villa? Tielemans, again, as you said, has stepped up his game since he got to Aston Villa, so maybe that will help him. But just looking at that team, I was like, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of experience in it at the moment.
No.
So maybe it's not massively surprising that the performances aren't particularly great. It's just the start of a new era for the Belgians, I suppose. I would say Openda is still relatively young. I want to say he's 24 years old. So kind of, maybe still developing, but should be maybe doing a little bit better. But overall, a decent result for Italy given the circumstances, and a very good performance. The other game, they did win 4-1. We saw Retegui backed up by Raspadori, which seemed to go well. Raspadori got an assist, Retegui with a goal. Di Lorenzo scoring 2, and Fratesi getting another one. But the question, Adam, we had was about Fagioli in this game. Do you think, again, this was from Andrea, thank you, Andrea, keeping us in work while you're not here, so thank you. Do you think he should be sent down to the under-21s? He looked a bit lost, or looks a bit lost in this squad. I feel like he's not really happy at Juventus at the moment either. How do you feel about Fagioli, Mr. Beans?
I mean, look, Mr. Bean was obviously promoted quite early in terms of his breakthrough at both Juventus and Italy. I think maybe a lot of people were sceptical when Spalletti included him when he came back from his ban. I'm not convinced on his form this season. And and it wouldn't do him any harm to be out of the Azzurri for at least a season potentially. Because look, I think there's so many midfielders that he's competing against, and in terms of like we've talked about the resurgence of Ricci, for example, in terms of his form that he's really demonstrating right now, and we can see him maybe earning a move to a bigger club at some point, And I've saw, early part of this season with Torino, he's doing these kind of cut through balls without looking, and they're going to, positions where Torino are able to attack from. And I think where do we see Fagioli kind of doing those kind of through balls, for example? I don't necessarily see it. I'm not too sure. And, we've got Pasilli now, for example, breaking through as well. He earned his first kind of cap for the Azzurri as well. I think there's a lot of competition right now, Roy, and it wouldn't do him any harm in terms of dropping into the under-21s, maybe establishing himself again. And like you say, maybe developing a bit more of a love and maybe developing his kind of credentials again, because I think people are a bit lost. Like I say, there's definitely an opportunity because I don't know how long the likes of Pellegrini will be in this Azzurri squad going forward. But look, he needs to find himself, I think it's fair to say. I think obviously he's got some love in Motta. Motta likes the look of him right now. So he's got the backing of his club coach. I think he just needs to back it up with performances, really, Rory. And right now, I don't see that right now. I don't see him being kind of the catalyst for Juventus when they've been struggling, for example. And that's what he needs to understand, is that if he wants to become the household player, he needs to be more aspiring, more ambitious in terms of his style of play. And yeah, look, under 21s wouldn't do him any harm. That's for sure, Roy.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think coming back from the ban, obviously Tonali's come back flying from the ban, and maybe for Fagioli not so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe a bit of time out the spotlight might help him. But
I'd say so.
All of this does leave Italy top of their Nations League A Group 2 group on 10 points, 3 wins and a draw. They're the only unbeaten team in the group, of course, against France, Belgium, and the team that shouldn't be there. Overall, very, very positive for Italy. What a fantastic break. Grande Spalletti, we're delighted for you.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk all things the other countries in Nations League that don't include England, because they get their whole own episode of their own. We will see you on the other side.
And there was the description of Cristiano Ronaldo leaving Hampden Park with just a solitary point. Yes, Rory, he was frustrated. He didn't get a goal against the Scots, and more importantly, John Souttar had him in his back pocket. However, that kind of summarises a little bit of how Group 1 kind of played out over the kind of weekend period, because obviously that also includes my beloved Poland in this group. In this group, we've also got Croatia, and there's some fascinating ties. So let's start off by talking about Portugal. They got the draw against, obviously, Scotland. So great result from a Scottish perspective, because, yeah, I think up until that point, it looks like they're the relegation candidates as it currently stands. However, that gives them a fighting chance of getting out of this group. However, prior to that, they got a good victory against the Poles, against them in Warsaw. 3-1 win, courtesy of Jan Bednarek's own goal as well towards the end.
He loves an own goal, Jan Bednarek. He fucking loves an own goal.
He's absolutely donkey trash. That's all I'm going to say. He's him and Davidovic. That's all I'm going to say. Between the two of them, and that is the main kind of concerns in the Polish media, is just how poor and how passive the kind of defensive duo have been. I mean, obviously not helped by Jakub Kivor, and the fact that his kind of lack of game time is probably harming him in terms of game sharpness, shall we say. But on a more positive note, Rory, Poland became kind of famous over this kind of weekend for giving debuts to Maxi Oyedele, who is the first naturalized Pole. Really, I suppose for those outsiders, they might kind of look at this and be like, how the hell has this come about? Because this lad obviously came through the Man United Youth Academy, was a progressive kind of player in terms of his duties, and even the likes of Bruno Fernandes kind of commented about the fact that they actually thought he had a future at Old Trafford, up until this summer where he was brought to Legia Warsaw. And he's got himself his first cap for the Polish squad. A bit of disappointment in terms of his display on the day against Portugal. It's going to be a very tough game. He didn't do anything wrong, Rory, by all accounts. He just didn't do much apart from keep hold of possession. But it was great from a point of view of first naturalized black hole, for example. He qualifies.
This was the lad who did the interview in Polish, right?
Yes, he did the interview in Polish. So he has obviously had some Polish influence. His grandmother and I believe it's his mum's side, who are Poles, essentially, married to a Nigerian. So yeah, absolutely bizarre kind of events, but he has played for the under-21. So he has played in the kind of youth ranks within the Polish national setup. And yeah, he got himself a chance. But I suppose the beauty of the story was he was last year on loan at Forest Green Rovers, prior to that Altrincham, and now he finds himself at Legia Warsaw and playing for the national squad for Poland. So absolutely incredible. But on another note, we also saw another debutant, that was Michael Amiemi, who is the first black-born Pole. So not to get confused with Maxi Oyedeli. So the story with Michael Amiemi, he plays for Raków Częstochowa. He's basically a winger, but he was born in Poland. Prior to the game, there was a lot of hype around him, potentially because he displayed his heart for wanting to play for the national side. And it was a beautiful story. And when he came on, he was actually quite threatening. If it wasn't for a referee decision, he could have earned a penalty for Poland prior to that own goal by Bednarek. But on a lighter note, obviously Poland did play Croatia. This was on Tuesday evening and played out a 3-3 draw. Great game, should I say, for the neutral, because
I was going to say, it had everything. Red cards, 6 goals. It was absolutely mental.
Absolutely incredible. Not great for me personally, because unfortunately, as I mentioned, Davidovich gives away one of the goals by placidly just passing the ball across goal, and it gets intercepted by the Croats. But I have to credit Croatia as well, because initially Poland take the lead through Zielinski, and then Sosa for Croatia does a fantastic half volley that brings them back into the match. So definitely recommend for listeners and viewers, check it out on YouTube, because it was a hell of a goal if you didn't see it live. But yeah, that game had it all, Rory, and it does open up the group in that respect, because whilst Poland are third place on 4 points, obviously Croatia not that far ahead really as it currently stands in the standings. They are currently with 7 points, and Portugal leading the group as it currently stands. All I would say, though, however, Rory, Poland have it tough in the next group games, because they've got to go to Portugal, whereas Scotland host Croatia. So I'm hoping, in bizarre circumstances, that Scotland are held to a draw with Croatia, or, at least Croatia don't win that match, shall we say. And Poland maybe get a draw. That's probably me being very optimistic at this stage, given how well Portugal did play. One mention for Portugal, though, in the match against Poland, Nuno Mendes, who we know has had a fantastic season for Lazio, really creative down that left-hand flank, and Rafael Leao for the goal that Cristiano Ronaldo did score against Poland. Incredible. And Rafael Leao did look like the Rafael Leao of old, where he was just a menace. He just held off players, running at pace, just fearful. Mate, he was just incredible. Hopefully for Milan fans, that's a kind of air of optimism, should we say.
Well, they'll take anything at the minute, I'll be honest. Any sign of life from Leao, I think they'll be bloody snatching at. Yeah. But Nuno Tavares needs to be studied by scientists. I don't know what happened to him this season. He's been absolutely insane. But every Arsenal podcast I'm listening to at the minute
he's just stopped kissing those dogs. Who knows?
Well, exactly. Maybe he's focusing on the field for once. But every Arsenal podcast has been like, have you heard what Nuno's doing in Italy? It's just this real kind of, there was always a player there, but we just never really could figure it out. But yeah, incredible stuff. For Scotland, that's a massive point, genuinely, because their form has been so terrible. I think it's just great for them to get a kind of marquee result against a big team of okay, guys, remember, we can do this again, because they've really not been in good form. And I think that Euros campaign really knocked the stuffing out of them a little bit. For the next bit, let's talk a little bit of Ireland, I suppose. We've done Poland, so I'm going to talk a little bit of Ireland. And the last international break was so depressing. So depressing,
Yeah.
so depressing. And when I remembered that it was a Nations League, when it was an international break, I tweeted, "Oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to watch Ireland again." And that was my kind of general mood coming into the break. But there was a massive 2-1 win against Finland, which was delightful to watch. Still very open at the back, and kind of if Finland could finish, then there might have been a bit more of a competition. But huge moment for Festi Ebosele as he came on and provided the incredible assist for an even better finish for Robbie Brady to win the game. Like there was nothing stylish about this. There was nothing like polished. It was just like so huge for this team and for Heimar. To get a win, that it was like this just physical relief of like, oh, thank fuck we've done it. Right now, Finland are not a good team. They're bottom of the group and deserve to be there, right? But that makes it even more vital that Ireland got this win, because I don't know if they're going to get any other wins in this group. So it was vital that they did this. I was really genuinely impressed, especially in the second half with their performance. What worries me is I feel like, and it doesn't surprise me, but the manager starts games far too cautiously. So what we saw with his Iceland team was like they soaked up pressure and broke, But when you start a game in reverse gear, once you concede a goal, it's impossible to go to fifth gear, right? You have to it's difficult to turn the tide. And I think what really highlighted it for me was the Greece game, because now Greece obviously buoyant in a way, a big win against England, but obviously going through a lot with the like tragic passing of George Baldock, and obviously our thoughts go out to his family and his friends. This Greece team are looking like a proper team. They look like they could really, there's a lot of talent there, there's a lot of quality, they know what they're doing. So I understand Ireland starting and being very cautious. But once they scored, that's when Ireland decided to play. And then we actually kind of, I would argue over the second half, a draw probably would have been a fair result. I think Ireland genuinely had lots of chances. 2-0 makes it look worse than it did, because Kelleher just, a complete lapse of concentration at the end, and just like, it's really unlucky because he kept us in the game. And that's unfortunately the life of a goalkeeper. The highlight reel is you making the mistake, not the 10 saves you made across the game, right? But I think the performance once we conceded was really encouraging. And I was like, right, why can't we do that from the beginning? I just wish we'd done that from the beginning of the game, or maybe a little bit earlier, and just been like, we can implement ourselves on this game, or we can like leave a mark on this game, because it just felt like it was so passive. So I feel like a little bit of like encouragement from Heimar and from the Irish national team. It was a low bar, so, you know, anything was positive. But coming out of this international break, I'm not ready to, like, you know, commit just yet. So, yeah, it was overall quite a nice international break, I suppose. We won a game.
You did want to call out, though, Nathan Collins, right? Because you did mention
a player that when he signed, thank you for reminding me, you're very good at this. A player that when he signed for Brentford last year, I think everyone was like, I remember us on the pod being like, why the hell have they spent that much money on that guy? It was not good, right? I'm not saying he's like suddenly, you know, Paolo Maldini, but I'm seeing a lot of improvement in him. I think he's having a very good season for Brentford. And I think every Ireland game, he's really been like progressing the ball and a lot more solid. Not as many like lapses in concentration as he was having and getting caught in possession. I think his passing has got a little bit calmer, a little bit better. I just think I was watching him and I was like, I'm not as nervous watching you now as I was 6 months ago, 8 months ago. So I think it just needs to be called out that there has been a real improvement there, and that if he continues to progress as a player, which I think he will do under Thomas Frank, like there's potentially a really good defender there. I would really like Liam Scales as well from Celtic. Obviously scored on his debut, which was delightful. And a player that's obviously doing really well for Celtic this year, and another player for us to get quite excited about. A few alarm bells about Evan Ferguson. He's still only 19. He's had a big injury. Let's relax. Just because he scored a hat-trick. When he scored the hat-trick against Newcastle, the reaction was insane. And I got carried up in it as well. I was like, get him at Arsenal. He's the greatest number 9 in the world, right? And now people have gone the other way. I think just he's 19 years old. It'll come. It's fine.
Sure.
Yeah, overall positive, and Festi Ebosele, what a player. Absolutely love him.
One thing I did want to allude to, though, however, is like you've already kind of mentioned, is your coach. A lot of reports about him not necessarily putting the effort into viewing games where the Irish contingent are playing, in particular in the UK and elsewhere. Are you concerned about this and maybe his kind of perceived lack of preparation, or maybe just talent scouting? Do you think that's a harsh criticism, or do you think that's a right criticism? Because I heard a lot of that on social media. I was just curious for your take on that.
Yeah, I think look, he kind of came out and said he's not going to watch games in the UK, and you're like, well,
Which is bizarre, right?
that's where all our players are. Like, honestly, if you want to sit and watch the League of Ireland, absolutely go for it. Find players there that we can develop. Find the young players. Go there if you want to for the young players, right? But you have to be watching the Championship, League One, the Premier League to try and you have to, right? The only thing for me where I think I'm a little bit more positive is that the choices in this squad were made a little bit more sense than the squad that John O'Shea picked in the last international break. So I think, obviously, but I think he has clearly taken some interest in the players and has kind of looked at Festi Ebosele and looked at Liam Scales and looked at these players that maybe weren't getting the call-ups or weren't like just a little bit more exciting. Troy Parrott started, like things like that. I think we're starting to see a little bit of him like, no, I know these players, or I'm beginning to know these players. So I think, look, we'll see how much. We'll see whether he does or not. Whether he goes to watch games in the UK, we'll see over the next couple of months. But over this selection and this international break, I felt encouraged, not discouraged. In general, I think. Nice. Adam, any other games quickly? Because I'm aware of time that we wanted to kind of highlight. Some of the groups are looking very close, right?
Yeah, I think we should really kind of focus our efforts on the Nations League B, because that's where the drama seems to be. There was no innuendo in that, definitely not. Group 1, though, just to highlight, Czechia are currently top with Georgia and Albania a point behind. And we've got Ukraine, who are 3 points behind Czechia, and they're currently bottom of that group. But that just goes to show you, Rory, how tight that particular group is. But that's not the only group to keep our eyes out on for the next group games anyway, because Group 3 is also a fascinating one. We've got Norway, Austria, and Slovenia all on 7 points. So incredible. This group could go any way, basically. I did look
and
at
Kazakhstan on 1. Don't forget them. Don't forget Kazakhstan. They blew their chance of qualification. Right? But I'm always going to mention them.
And there is that. But then we also have to highlight Group 4 because we've got Turkey and the Welsh contingent in there. So Wales currently second, 2 points behind Turkey. And guess what? The next group game is going to be Turkey versus Wales. That's going to be a hell of a good encounter. It's fair to say. I think Craig Bellamy got a bit of slack at the beginning, but he's starting to get some results. Obviously, I think there's definitely credentials about him. There's a lot of people that thought he was definitely a progressive in terms of his style of football. And be fascinating. Will he bring out his golf club for this match? I don't know, but it depends on how much the Turks really annoy him. But I think this is really exciting for the Welsh side anyway. They're doing really well. Got themselves a 1-0 win against Montenegro, I think it was, in the last group game. So important win. I think the fact was Brennan Johnson didn't play in that particular match. So a lot of hope for the next upcoming match. But Turkey, obviously, we know their credentials. They've got some good individuals. Arda Güler, to name just one. Hakan Çalhanoğlu, another one. They've got some really talented players, it's fair to say, Rory, though.
They're dark horses for the World Cup, I heard. That's all I'm hearing. Maybe. They're dark horses for the World Cup, so we will see. But yeah, very excited by Bellamy and Wales at the moment. I think it was really important for them to get Page out of the way and get this new manager in and get a bit of excitement again. So guys, that is the Nations League. That is the international break. I very quickly wanted to talk about AFCON, which is as mental as always. One story, we'll do like the light and the dark, right? Let's do that, light and shade. We'll start with the shade. Absolutely mental. Nigeria, William Troost-Ekong having to kind of live post on Twitter the conditions that they went through with the Libyan FA. locking them in the airport, saying that the airplane
Yeah.
couldn't be
No
refueled,
food.
holding their passports, making them sleep on the chairs in the airport, and the whole thing was just like a real summation of, I think, a lot of these associations, because it happens in South America as well a lot, and it happens in Asia as well a lot, less so in Europe because I think it's just a bit harder to get away with it. But yeah, I just thought it was really depressing that Troost-Ekong had to resort to like social media for anything to happen.
Yeah.
There was a video released where the pilot basically told him exactly what he was told to do. And I just think it's something where FIFA and the AFC need to step in and be like, or CAF even, and CAF need to step in and be like, what the hell's going on? Like this, like there has to be some standards here. Because like, I think a lot of people don't have sympathy because it's like, oh, they're millionaires, they're footballers. Not all of these players are, right? And they're still human beings. They have to like sleep in a bed. They have to play for their countries, right? So I think it was just a story where I was like, oh, it's really depressing. But yeah, it was all sorted in the end. But the other story in CAF is that it looks like things are getting even more depressing for Ghana, as they are not, or it looks increasingly likely that they're not going to qualify for the AFCON, which would be an absolute embarrassment for Ghana as a nation. For them to not even make it to the African Cup of Nations is like a huge deal. They lost 2-0 to Sudan. And a huge win for Sudan. We have to say, like, a country that's going through horrendous things, like a team that's really building. It's a really feel-good story for this team to get a win. Unfortunately, the headline, like I presented it, has been that Ghana lost. But leading from their really poor performances in the last AFCON, their really poor performances in general, there really needs to be like a root and branches look at Ghanaian football, because I think this is a team that we really associate with like successful teams. Always a powerhouse in Africa, and at the moment it just feels like the youth development just is not being brought through there. It's not being managed properly. There's always scandals in terms of the players' bonuses and hotels and stuff, and I just think Ghanaian football at the moment is in a real bad place. That would have been something to cheer up the Nigerian players and fans, though. They do not like each other. So I'm sure that helped them this week when they saw Ghana lose. So, light and shade. But guys, that is all of the international break, I think. We're going to take a very quick break again. And when we come back, we're going to talk all things Serie A, because it is back.
Calcio is back, and we will go through the fixtures to start off with before we between me and Rory, pick off the key games that will take place this weekend. So we'll start off with Saturday's games, starting at 2 p.m. UK time, starting off with Como at home to Parma. So beloved Parma don't have to play a Monday night fixture, Rory. However, we also have Genoa at home to Bologna. Then at 5 p.m, we've got Milan at home to Udinese. And then 7:45, we've got a really good game of Juventus taking on Lazio. Moving into Sunday at 11:30, we've got Empoli at home to Napoli. At 2 p.m, Lecce at home to Fiorentina. Venezia at home to Atalanta. Before at 5 p.m, we have Calgary taking on Torino. And then the big game, I would say, this weekend, which is Roma at home to Inter, and that's 7:45. Before we move into Monday, we haven't got our beloved 5:30 kickoff time. However, 7:45, Hellas Verona at home to Monza. So, Rory, shall we start off by kind of picking off Saturday's games to start off with? And I think we might as well talk about Genoa, because since we've gone on this international break, it seems to be even gloomier kind of news for the Genoa fans. I did kind of catch on to a bit of a topic going on Twitter where one of the followers of our pods, the Toronto group of Genoa fans, reminiscing about their situation. And it seems very evident that their situation has been made dire by the 777 group being made officially bankrupt, essentially, in a UK court. They made them go into administration, so they no longer potentially will own Genoa, because they'll have to sell some of their assets to kind of relieve some of the debt. They've got a huge amount of portfolio assets, which include obviously Genoa as a club. But it doesn't look too rosy, because the two groups that are linked with them, one of them is Oak View Tree Group, I believe that's how you call it, and they are another property group. So yeah, from the outside, it doesn't look promising, does it, Rory?
No, well, a couple of weeks, or maybe last week, I was watching, and they were talking on 90 Minuti about there being a Saudi group and there being an American group, and maybe this is encouraging for Genoa, but the PIF are clearly not that interested. Todd Bowley was very briefly linked, but I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but
Yeah,
clearly isn't interested. Look, the writing's been on the wall for Genoa for a while with this 777 group. It doesn't make it any easier for the fans or the players or the managers or the staff, but we've kind of known this is coming. So I think it's just really important that the next step is stability for Genoa, and whoever comes in is kind of tries to I don't know, keep them in the league, do something, because it really is just not looking good there at the moment. I think this Oakview group isn't, like, I was just reading briefly about them. As you said, it seems like it's another real estate company. They have a WNBA team and they have an NHL team, I want to say. But it seems like most of their assets and most of their interest is tied up in stadiums and stadium naming deals and land for stadiums. Yeah, it does kind of feel like 777 cut and paste. So not great for Genoa. And possibly not great for Gilardino, right? If he loses this game, it seems like it could be his last game in charge. And if we want another character in the league, Adam, who is rumoured to be taken over from him?
Well, I don't know which one we were referring to, but there's two potentially. But the main one we're talking about in this particular kind of section is Joel Salpali, who is previous of Sevilla and Marseille. And we know what a batshit manager, crazy kind of ideals he has, works his plays to the ground. More importantly, causes arguments, right, Rory?
Yeah. Yeah, he's never people aren't happy for long with Sampaoli. Usually there's like a little bit of success, like he did well at Sevilla and he won the Copa America with Chile. Like his CV is relatively decent, but people tend to hate him when he leaves. So it'll be really interesting to see how he fits in with that change room, if it is him that is going to take over. We obviously of this pod hope that Gilardino stays in his job, manages to keep the job, because I think he's quite an exciting manager dealing with very difficult circumstances. But that is Genoa Bologna. Let's talk to the other games on Saturday. Let's go for Milan Udinese before we talk Juve Lazio. Milan Udinese, a cheeky top six clash, Adam. Milan currently find themselves in sixth, Udinese fifth. Udinese 2 points ahead of the Rossoneri. Obviously, Udinese struggling for a bit of form, but did get a win before the international break. Milan, the opposite, were in form, but lost just before the break. It's going to be an interesting one, right? This is a chance for Udinese to kind of stamp their authority a little bit on with a Milan team that have less than impressed.
Fascinating, because I think there's less to lose from an Udinese perspective than there is for a Milan point of view, and maybe from second point of view as well. More importantly, I think there's a lot of expectation for Milan to get a result against Udinese, but as you allude to, not going to be straightforward. Under Costa Runic, they've definitely got their act together at Udinese. They're promising, they're showing signs of good football at the moment. But I do worry about them in terms of their form and whether they can sustainably keep this run going forward. I would anticipate Milan to get the result given the qualities of both squads. However, never say never, right, Rory? And I think maybe this break came at the right time for Udinese to kind of reset and, get an important few days rest for certain players. So it'll be interesting from that point of view. But yeah, Milan have got to kind of build on what some of those players have displayed on their international duties. The likes of Rafael Leao, for example, as I alluded to earlier, he could be the difference maker in this game. And hopefully, if he can bring that form to Milan, I'm sure Milan fans will once again appreciate him, as they always do, right, Rory?
Well, absolutely. Never a bad word said about him. And the next game on Saturday that we're all excited about is, of course, Juve taking on Lazio. I got that one the right way around, right? Juve, Lazio?
Yep.
Lazio, Juve? Lazio, Juve?
Lazio, yeah.
Juve, Lazio. And Adam, how do you see this game going? Nuno Tavares, how many assists?
Hopefully, a minimum of two, right? But yeah, this could be a genuinely fascinating game because, like, Lazio started to build some momentum under Baroni. The style of football seemed to be pleasing for the camaraderie of the squad. They seem to be getting kind of flow together. Boulay Diao is starting to get a bit of a partnership with Castellanos up top, but Matteo Guendouzi also kind of pulling the strings in midfield as well. So I think that's going to be a fascinating kind of encounter against this kind of Motta Juventus squad. A lot of questions about Dusan Vlahovic again, because his form going out of this wasn't particularly great. And that was what formed one of the questions that we received from one of our listeners, Alex David, asking us if we were to describe Dusan Vlahovic as a supermarket chain, what would he be? Have you thought about this yet?
I have
Because
thought
I'm
about this.
still don't know, but go for it.
I have thought about this. I'm going to say, and it sounds derogatory, but I'm going to try and pull it back. Lidl. So I think he's functional. You know what you're going to get. Maybe it's not as cheap as you expected. Look at the prices in Lidl. It looks cheaper than it is, guys. It's not as cheap as you expect. But the famous middle aisle in Lidl, right? Sometimes you will find exactly what you need. You will find that hammer drill that you've been looking for the past 6 months at a lovely price of €20, and Vlahovic will score 2 goals. But then the next week, you'll turn up and it'll be a kayak with a hole in it and a broken oar for €40, and that is Vlahovic not scoring. So I'm going to go for Vlahovic is the Lidl of strikers. I do have to say, I shop at Lidl, but other supermarkets are available.
Cool. I would go with the comparison of Morrison's because they kind of looked like they were going to compete, but they failed to deliver, right?
I like it.
I think I'm going to stick with that analogy. So hopefully, Alex, you appreciate those analogies there. But back to the football. Where do we think this is going to go, Rory? Do we think Juve will get the result, or do we think this could be a draw?
I think Lazio are going to get a result here. Juve can't score for love nor money. They're really not scoring that often. I think Lazio are quite clinical. I think when they create chances, they do tend to take them. So I think, I think Lazio are going to nick a win here, and Juve will be very frustrated as they create the majority of the chances, but don't score. So I'm going to go for like a 1-0 win for Lazio, maybe.
Okay. I think this could be a score draw just purely because, Rory, I'm not convinced by Provedel this season. He's really disappointed me, and I think he's got a calamitous moment in him. But anyway, let's move on to Sunday's game, and we'll allude to begin with, Empoli and Napoli. Reason being, Empoli starting really well so far in this campaign. I think they've surprised everyone, but I think the main reason is Napoli, obviously currently going into this break as top dogs. And more importantly, we also had a question on how have Napoli managed to turn it around for Mons Sportif. So, Roy, do you want to take us through what was it? What do you think it's down to in terms of Antonio Conte turning it around after that Hellas Verona results at the beginning of the season?
Well, thank you for getting in touch, guys. Friends of the show. Always lovely to hear your names. Look, I think the big headline here is that Conte has kind of rather controversially switched to a back four when we're so famous, when he's kind of relinking to a back three so much, and that 3-5-2. He's gone to a back four, and he's kind of done this to try and purely to accommodate Scott McTominay, and it seems to be pulling out. Like, it seems to be working out. I think, obviously, with Conte, the methods and the style of football, it was very different from Spalletti, and it's very different from what the actual mess was last year at Napoli. I think there was a lot of recovery there for Conte to get out of that group. Like, you have to remember the worst ever title defense from a Scudetto winner, 3 managers in a year, squad kind of confidence rock bottom. The Osimhen running out of the club, everything was just so toxic. I think there was a lot for Conte to come in, get the players he wants that he always wants, and just detoxify the place a little bit before he could then get his ideas across. Obviously, we've said it a million times, the fact that Napoli are only playing 1 game a week really works into Conte's favour. That's why I think at the moment Napoli are going to win the league. But I think the main thing is that he's shown a bit of tactical flexibility in terms of how the team is set up. and he's trying to fit the players that can impact games the most on the pitch and playing offensive football. They are going for it. They know that the energy they have, they should be able to outrun most teams, and they're going to have more time to recover. So I think it's a really impressive start from Conte. Just the mood shift in Napoli is incredible if you think back to last season, right, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's night and day if you compare last season to this season and the approach. I've already alluded to the fact that I think the players have kind of got on board with Conte's style, and I think there's definitely some kind of togetherness in terms of that squad. But what I would allude to going into this match is Stanislav Lobotka, unfortunately, has got a thigh injury, so potentially will miss this game, as well as Alex Meret. He's got a muscular injury, so he will be also missing. So could be two important individuals to be missing from this game. And given Roberto De Versa is doing some good stuff with Empoli and one other hoodoo for Napoli, Empoli completed a double over them last season. So this could be a game that Empoli might shock some people and maybe give the opportunity to the likes of Inter, who will play later that day. So let's see what happens. But just put that in the back of your heads if you're going to place a bet on this game, because I don't think it's going to be straightforward for Napoli in terms of that game. They will, Lobotka has been the guy that pulls the strings. And although I have my doubts about Meret, I think he's certainly a better option in terms of their goalkeeping options down there at Napoli. So let's see if he's going to be fit enough for this match. But Rory, should we move over to Roma and Inter? Because that is the big game, isn't it? Right. How do we see this game playing out? Because obviously going into this break, Ivan Juric was threatened with his job already, and there was the potential of a David Nicola return into the sense of Daniele De Rossi being maybe reinstated as coach at Roma. I don't think that's going to happen. However, Ivan Juric hasn't maybe inspired the kind of sense that he would bring Roma back to a victorious way, should we say. How do you see this playing out? And also from a Inter perspective, they need to get a win, right?
Yeah, it's huge for both teams. I think that I can only really see an Inter win here. I think Roma just are not looking like anything that they should be at the moment. Even the wins, like we talked, I remember the win against Venezia, we said like they were kind of lucky, like very lucky. Like it doesn't feel like Juric has come in with the backing of the squad, right? The squad were quite open about the fact that they wanted De Rossi there.
Yeah.
And they weren't particularly happy about it. I think Roma, this could be a really long season for them. And I think this return is just not the fixture you want. Like you're at home, so there's pressure for you to go and attack, but then you're against into like a team that if you attack too much, they will just pick you apart. And I think this is kind of like if it was Inter away, you could maybe be like, oh, there's no pressure on us here. Nobody expects us to win. But with it being at home, it's just like all the mood around the club. You're expected to try and implement your style of play. I think Inter could really get a big confidence boosting win here. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the players that went on international duty, they've all had good games. There might be some concern for the likes of Zielinski, who did pick up an injury in the last game. However, for the majority, they're all fit and well. And given I think Inzaghi is desperate to get some momentum going now again, I think this could be curtains for Roma. If you remember rightly, in the last time that they did play each other, it was a very enthralling game because Roma scored twice in this match. However, Inter did peg them back and then eventually did win. I think it was 4-2 in the end. So really good game. I'm anticipating maybe less goals on this occasion. And I probably see Inter being victorious, but maybe 2-1, something like that. I don't know if you feel that's going to be maybe the way it goes, because I think with Ivan Juric, you expect there to be a bit of fight, right? I don't think there are going to be any pushovers, but certainly it might be flattering to deceive, should we say, at times. So let's see, Rory. But I think that was the key games, wasn't it, for this kind of Serie A game week anyway?
They are the key games for you to keep an eye on. But as always, guys, there's always one game in Serie A where you're not looking and then there's like 6 goals. Could be Lecce Fiorentina. It could be Como Parma. Let's go Como Parma. And maybe Parma can get another red card. Maybe they can continue this hot streak of red cards. We will have to see. But listener, thank you for joining us. Viewer, thank you for joining us.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed being back with us. Adam, have you got anything to say to them before I send them on their way and they can listen to our Premier League episode?
Yeah, like, subscribe, and make sure you just keep on top of all of these socials that we have. That'd be really appreciated.
Beautiful. And for those socials, you can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram, TikTok, Threads at Anglo-Italian Pod. And you can follow us, hit like and subscribe on YouTube, as Adam said, on your podcast app of choice. Give us a follow, give us a rating. And we're still continuing the campaign to call me a knobhead. Leave a review. Just call me a knobhead. It's fine. It's all publicity. Guys, we will see you on the other side, and we'll see you for our Premier League episode right now. We'll see you then. Ciao. A dopo.
Ciao, ciao.